Well, Hong Kong has recorded a low turnout at their Legislative Council election, with fewer than 32% of voters casting their ballots. The elections have been overshadowed by the deadly apartment complex fire that has killed at least 156 people and left residents angry and traumatized. For more on the elections, I'm joined by Elaine Pearson from Human Rights Watch. He's the Asia Director. Elaine, good to have you with us on the program. Now, firstly, does it surprise you that the voter turnout was so low at about 32%?
No, not really, because, in 2021, the last election, the voter turnout was also about that. I think it was even lower. And frankly, I think the reason why a lot of people are not turning out to vote is because they don't feel like they've got much of a choice. I mean, pro-democracy legislators have been disqualified, they've been forced into exile, or they're sitting in prison. And so the reality is there isn't much of a choice because Hong Kong's Legislative Council is for patriots only, which means that legislators have to express their allegiance and loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party. And so I think a lot of people, despite the efforts of the Hong Kong government to encourage people to vote, to run a very sort of cute campaign of getting people out, I think particularly with the fire occurring, in the last week, it's hard to know what impact that has had. But I think a lot of people feel like that it doesn't really make much of a difference because these lawmakers and this Legislative Council is really just a rubber stamp for Beijing.
Yeah, so if it's patriots only, how much more entrenched now is Beijing and the Communist Party in the context of Hong Kong's election and its legislature?
Oh, much more entrenched. I mean, actually, you have a significant number of lawmakers who are from the mainland, who have ties to the Chinese government. So that means that while they may have lived in Hong Kong for a shorter period of time, they meet the residency requirements, they're not as familiar with a number of the issues on the island. And so that impacts their ability to vote. I mean, we've seen pretty much every law that's been introduced passed, except for the one on LGBT rights, on marriage equality. So you can see that, this Legislative Council, people don't have a lot of faith in it because, it really has a lot of ties to Beijing. And, people like Nathan Law or Ted Hui, who's Australia, they were previously legislators on the LegCo, but they've been forced into exile. Others like Longhair or Claudia Mo were part of the Hong Kong 47, who was the group that were mainly convicted under the national security law, because the national security law basically makes all sorts of things that are quite normal in a democracy illegal.
So have those convictions and jailing of figures like Claudia Mo, who has appeared on this program numerous times before her arrest, effectively, bring fear to those who may think they want to continue flying the pro-democracy flag in Hong Kong?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's had a really chilling effect. I mean, if you look at, the protests that used to be very boisterous and noisy, they don't take place anymore. Even you just look at what happened with the fire and the fact that volunteers were coalescing in order to provide support, and then they were warned that, they shouldn't do that. So people are very scared, and I think the Hong Kong government is also worried. They worry about when grief turns into anger and demands for accountability on the government. And this is straight out of Beijing's playbook. I mean, we've seen, Beijing operate this way with the Sichuan earthquake. And what they're worried about is things like when there was the Urumqi fire, if you remember, during COVID, that was, the instigator for the white paper protests in the mainland. So, what we see here is the Hong Kong authorities really just trying to, take every step to control the message, as opposed to, realizing that, they don't have things to fear from people who are demanding accountability and asking questions, that those people are actually trying to prevent fires like the tragic one that took place and claimed so many lives.
Yes, as you mentioned there, the deadly Taipo fire has been on the minds of Hong Kong residents. So given a far more one-sided legislature, can demands of accountability ever be met?
Well, I mean, in the old Hong Kong, you would expect that the way that the residents had complained about the safety standards, it could have resulted in questions before the parliament. It could have resulted in some kind of parliamentary inquiry. But that's the old Hong Kong, and that doesn't happen now. You don't have a media that is robust enough to be asking a lot of these questions. Papers like the Apple Daily the tabloid that, was founded by Jimmy Lai. Jimmy Lai's in prison. The Apple Daily doesn't exist anymore. So Hong Kong is really a shadow of its former self. And I think the Legislative Council isn't the place actually to have these robust discussions. Yes, a committee has now been established to investigate the fire and how it transpired. But I think there's a lot of comparisons to the commission of inquiry that was set up before when there was a devastating fire in the 1990s. And that commission of inquiry, because of the robust requirements around it, meant that, it was really possible to ensure that there was full accountability and that there was a complete overhaul of safety standards. But I think now the fact that, people who've started petitions or who've complained online have been questioned by the authorities or in some cases arrested, it means that people don't have a lot of faith in this government to actually, independently and thoroughly investigate what happened and to hold the perpetrators accountable.
Yeah, so is this increasingly giving a more chilling effect to residents there because authorities have invoked national security laws to warn of the consequences for, so-called anti-China elements who say that they are looking to use the fire to cause trouble?
Oh, absolutely. There is a huge chilling effect. I mean, just in recent days, we had media organizations that were brought before the National Security Police, and they were basically warned about their reporting. And they were said, they were basically told, not to spread false rumors or lies or distortions. And this has a huge chilling effect, actually, on local media, on people's ability to resist online or to ask questions about what is taking place. And I think it really just reflects the insecurity of the Hong Kong authorities, because they are very worried that a tragic disaster like this, in which so many people were killed, could become the instigator for further protests. And so they, will stop at nothing really to make sure that that won't happen. And so that means these initial arrests that we've seen of people who were sharing videos of the fire, who were asking questions and demanding accountability from the Hong Kong government. All of that, which is quite normal in a democracy, to ask questions and demand accountability, these are now being seen as, threats to national security and offences for which people can, potentially be arrested. I think it's also worth knowing that, people have been driven into exile from Hong Kong. Many of the activists, the former lawmakers, the journalists that would have reported on this, have had to leave Hong Kong precisely because of, the overbearing draconian nature of the national security law that was passed 5 years ago.
Yes, but just a final question, is there any hope that these draconian laws can be reversed in the future, either by way of local pressure or perhaps the work of those who are currently in exile?
Well, I mean, in Hong Kong, the last sort of truly independent political party, the last pro-democracy party, was unfortunately forced to disband. It disbanded in June, they said, because of political pressure. So it's very unlikely that that pressure is going to come from within Hong Kong. But Hong Kong has a very big diaspora of activists around the world who are very committed to asking questions and demanding accountability. And I think foreign governments should be pressuring and holding the Chinese government to account by all means necessary. They should be raising concerns about the national security law. Unfortunately, what we've seen last year is that the national security law has now been supplemented by a new security ordinance, which is, equally draconian and very broad. And so, I think it's very unlikely for Beijing simply to change course on its own. It really needs to feel the pressure from foreign governments, and that includes governments like Australia, like the European Union, to really press the Beijing government and the Hong Kong government to enact laws that are in line with international standards.
Okay, Elaine, Pearson, many thanks for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.